All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is a virtual town hall, and today we're joined by several manufacturing leaders to talk about their experiences with pivoting production towards PPE and COVID-19 response needs. So my name is April Brown, and I'm with the Economic Development Coalition for Asheville-Buncombe County, which is also a part of the Asheville Area Chamber of Commerce. And my role there is as Director of Existing Industry and Workforce Development. And as you can imagine, more than ever before, we are coordinating very closely between business, our business community, and our government community to strategically and collaboratively see ourselves through this crisis. So first, I want to thank our panelists for joining us today. Each of them will introduce themselves here in just a few minutes. But as you can imagine, these individuals are working around the clock. So we really appreciate you taking the time to share your stories and talk with us today. And I also want to thank everyone who has joined in the live broadcast. Many of you are chamber members, and we appreciate you being a member. Your engagement and participation is ever more important in a time like this. We're looking to you all to keep us up to speed with your needs and concerns so that we can continue to influence decisions and make informed decisions for our community. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. And first, I wanted to review just very briefly, before we introduce our panelists, I wanted to review briefly the survey results from about 100 WNC MAHEC health practices. And this is a survey that MAHEC sent to them, and they asked questions about, basically about PPE supply and COVID-19 preparedness and response. So you can see the link at the top. Check out that link. It goes into great detail. It's got some really nice graphics and charts to show the responses. I made my own graphic here just based on the data that I saw from the Excel sheet, but just because I wanted to just highlight a few of the questions. So as I said, in light of our conversation today, I wanted to highlight just the PPE supply questions. And the survey asked about the specific health practices supply of PPE. And so what we're seeing here is their supply for the next 2 weeks. And they also ask for their response on their supply for the next 4 weeks. So what you can see here is that for the next 2 weeks, about 65% of the responses indicate that they have sufficient PPE. That's a good thing, but of the 100, there's still between 25 to 40% who indicate they have a shortage. So that, obviously that's why we're here today. That's why we're having these conversations. But I also, for the next 4 weeks, what you can see is that the shortage is much greater. And so only about 39% indicate that they have sufficient supply. And what this dotted line is showing is actually, it's just the overlay of the question from the 2 weeks. And it's showing how the respondents answered the question for the supply and who indicated that they did not have enough supply for 2 weeks. So you can see what it's showing is the increase in shortage from 2 weeks to 4 weeks. And especially, I imagine that will continue to be an issue if nothing is done about the supply. Last thing I wanted to say is that MAHEC is using these results to identify key areas for intervention. And I just thought it would be helpful to use this information it's a small subset of data specifically about a very local regional need here in Western North Carolina. But it sets the context for our conversation today. So with that, I will go ahead and let our panelists introduce themselves. So if you would, please introduce yourself in the order that's shown here on this slide. And if you would, just say your name and your title and your company name, but also let us know typically what you're producing before the COVID-19 pandemic. And you might still be producing some of those things now, but and then we'll also get in, maybe you could also share in your introduction what kinds of things you're producing in response to COVID-19. So David?
Hello, I'm David Billstrom. I'm the CEO at Kitsbow. I'm not the youngest person on this call, but we are the youngest company. We've been around for 7 years, but we've only been here for 5 months. We moved the company from California 5 months ago. And we're making face shields and face masks. Normally we make premium apparel. Right now we're not making any apparel. We're only making masks. And I can talk some more about that.
Great, thank you, David. All right, Tom.
Hi, I'm Tom Dempsey, founder and CEO of Sylvan Sport here in Brevard, North Carolina. We've been in business 16 years and we manufacture a variety of small towable RVs and campers. We also make an array of general outdoor gear, from sleeping bags and tents and backpacks and lighting devices. Since about the first week in March, we have not manufactured anything in this facility except for face shields and countertop barriers and automated door openers that we've provided to healthcare providers and businesses. We've also, over the years we've been in business, we've built up a strong sourcing team around the world, and we've redeployed them to find and bring in approved masks and gowns and Tyvek type isolation suits. So those are the array of things we're doing right now.
Great, thank you, Tom. Okay, Doug.
Yes, Doug Werkamp, a president and COO of Southeastern Container. We've been here in Inca since 1982. We are a manufacturing cooperative made up of Coca-Cola, independent Coca-Cola bottlers, and the Coca-Cola Company here in the United States and Canada. So we produce things: carbonated soft drink, water, isotonic, juice, milk bottles for the Coca-Cola bottlers. We have 5 facilities that cover about 34 states and 6 provinces in Canada. And our pivot was just to take some of our existing tooling and even some of our older blow mold assets and redeploy them. And we've been making hand sanitizer bottles. We've shipped probably close to 500,000 so far, and probably have requests in for another 300, 400,000, anywhere from a 2 ounce to a half liter to a 22 ounce configuration. So we've been working with a variety of folks out there who've been seeking hand sanitizers, some local folks, Dogwood Trust here in Asheville, others in the area. And we're also helping folks as far as way right now, I think, is Mississippi up into the Michigan area with various things. Some folks are taking our 2-liter bottles and using the straight wall portion of it for face shields. Others are just making their own sanitizer or taking out of large containers and repackaging into smaller convenient packages for maybe their merchandisers or others that are out in the trade on a day in, day out basis. So we're fortunate, we're considered critical infrastructure. So we've been running quite extensively here throughout this event or this pandemic. So.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
All right, Mike.
This is Mike Adams. I'm the CEO of Moog Music, employee-owned company that's been in Asheville since 1978. We actually saw this coming because a lot of our supply comes from China, and when they didn't come back from their Chinese New Year vacation, we began to pivot in early second week of February, started putting design resources towards a ventilator, began refurbishing CPAP machines, and are building face shields for Kitsbow at this time.
Great, thank you, Mike. And those of you that don't know, Moog makes synthesizers and other instruments, typically. Thank you. Mark?
I'm Mark Trexler from Survival Innovations. Jason Smith joining me here. He's off camera. We make aviation life support equipment. We're completely 100% DoD. For us to change gears, it was a little harder to do, but I'll talk about that later on. But most of what we design, from anywhere from ejection seat soft goods to harnesses, restraints for air crew members that fly. 90% of all the helicopter air crews in the U.S. fly with our equipment that restrains them into the aircraft. So right now we're changing, as of this morning, we're changing to making masks and then level 1, level 2 disposable tear-off gowns. So we just started full speed this morning with this effort.
Great. Thank you, Mark. All right, last but not least, Sarah.
Hi, this is Sarah Wood, and I am the founder of Good Talk, which is a business management firm here in Western North Carolina and also serving out in the Western Slope of Colorado. And I have recently helped stand up a connection site for suppliers, manufacturers, healthcare institutions, and businesses who are trying to prepare for reopening as well. And that is called supplyconnector.org.
Great. Well, thanks again for all of you. I know this is just an increasingly challenging time. There's no end to the different challenges that you all are facing and having to work through. And, you know, I've talked to each of you, you know, a lot of you firsthand. So I hear that, and I wish that it wasn't that way, but I also want you to know that we all appreciate that you're applying innovation and creative talent to addressing the time that we're in right now. So thanks again for being here. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and run through some moderated questions. So I'll go ahead and moderate the questions. For the folks that have chimed in and joined us, I just wanted to do a little housekeeping. If you do have questions, please feel free to submit them as we go. And then I can kind of elevate those questions at the end of our initial 5 questions. But please use the Q&A feature in the Zoom. Chat is available as well. Typically, the chat is there available if you want to share resources or share links or, you know, give someone props or a clap. Feel free to do that. But if you have a question, please submit it through the Q&A. All right, so the first question, I think we'll go ahead and maybe we'll have Doug start with this. Tell us about how you started and what was your primary motivation for pivoting manufacturer. I think I'd also like to hear from Mike as well, given that Mike, you started, from the sounds of it, you maybe started pivoting earlier than some of the others. So if you, and then any of you, please chime in.
Well, our process started here simply with just a conversation with one of our board members, one of our owners, and he having large quantities of sanitizer, but really no way to distribute it, no way to get it into the hands of the workforce. And it became very obvious very quickly during that conversation that we could help. And we had a variety of old mold sets lying around. One of our keys was we did not want to use a package that would be confused with a Coca-Cola product in the marketplace. So we had some mold sets that looked like hand soap and other products that we made over the years. So it was very easy to pull those molds out. I have a lab machine here in Anchor, North Carolina, and I've got a group of engineers who are grounded, not traveling, not doing anything. So really just put them to the task of let's fit these molds in this lab machine and let's start making product. And we started making a 22-ounce bottle and the 2-ounce bottle. And then since we've been able to move that up to where we can make 1 million bottles a day if need be in a Virginia facility for hand sanitizer. So we've got a lot of capacity and we're just trying to help whoever calls and asks and inquires, try to help them out in that space. So that was kind of the motivation for us. It's what we do. We make packaging, we make PET bottles, so it was relatively easy transition for us.
Great. Well, anyone else? Mike,
You
we
want
can
me to
see you
comment on
now. Yeah, go for it. Yeah, if you can.
So yeah, like I said, we saw this early on, and we were concerned mostly at that time because we didn't see supply coming back from China, and so we were looking at what would we do with our workforce back in early February, and so actually at that point we started some of the things that came a bit later, the spreading out of people, sending people home and sanitizing multiple times. But the primary motivation at the early stage was just we weren't getting material in, so we needed to pivot to our workforce to something. Since then, you know, it's kind of become a rallying point for the folks that work here. It's, you know, part of the culture is, as you can imagine, being in the music business, is to be, you know, very liberal about our support for the community and what we do. And so, you know, our whole workforce was very anxious to get started on helping in any way that we could see. And we were very fortunate to have some relationships locally that led to refurbishment of some respiratory equipment. And so we took some people and started doing that. And then the relationship with David at Kitsbow, we've got people that were making synthesizers are now building face shields. And our engineering resources have been refocused on a ventilator design that can be manufactured from commercial off-the-shelf parts. So our motivation was, you know, early on a little different than it is now. And so we're hoping that the work that we're doing will enable us to get through this a little quicker.
Great, thank you, Mike. David, you want to chime in since you and Mike are still have you muted? Oh, we can't. Oh, there you go. Great.
Yeah, so I'll keep it brief. You know, we were pretty altruistic in the first couple of days. Our revenue was still going fine. Our manufacturing was still underway. We had seen a drop in sales, and I think a little bit like was described, we'd already seen problems with our supply chain overseas. So we knew it was real. We weren't going to deny there was going to be a problem. So on March 3rd, I think, we started in the plant. So altruistically, we just wanted to help, and it became clear that we had a tiger by the tail when we didn't publish a press release. Our social media person wasn't involved. In fact, the entire marketing department, I think, had the day off. But on Saturday, the design crew was designing face masks, and the production crew was making face shields. And I posted about 5 pictures on Facebook. And I don't even like Facebook, but that created, I just looked at the numbers recently, 900 shares, 700 likes, 600 comments. I mean, it was crazy. And we have plenty of PPE business, and it's really, I am embarrassed to say, because of Facebook. Almost all the orders either came through Facebook or people heard about it on Facebook all over the country.
Well, that just goes to show how important, you know, your engagement with your customer base is. So there's something to be said for that.
Well, I also think that, and I say this with complete humility, I think it was a slow news day. It was the first Saturday, I think, for many people to be sheltering in place. And, you know, I'm a old, fat, white guy, and I used to be in venture capital, so I have a lot of investor friends, and they married physicians. So I have an extraordinarily large number of physician family friends on Facebook. And I was a first responder for 38 years and counting now. So I have a number of first responders on Facebook, all over the country. So I think a lot of us who took this seriously and have been concerned about it from the beginning are, for better or for worse, on Facebook occasionally. So I think it was sort of the ideal mechanism. We weren't trying to sell to anybody, and we didn't attract the attention of 18-year-olds. We attracted the attention of 50 to 70-year-olds who were concerned and appreciated what we were doing.
I think that's an important point. I mean, I think having that network of individuals, and I wonder who else here on the panel that can speak to that, having the network of, you know, friends and family who are in the healthcare profession that lended to, you know, several ripples of other connections, allowing you to prop up, you know, the products that you're pivoting to make.
April, I can speak to that. Similar to many experiences of the team on this panel, we saw in early March an almost immediate cessation of our traditional product sales. It was around that first weekend in March. We had a big show planned. We knew the plug was going to be pulled on that, so we pulled that early. Like some of the others, we have some key products that came from international supply chain that were struggling to keep up due to what was happening in China and the factories being closed and people being kept home. And interestingly enough, I honestly did not put this all together until after we were well down the road of switching over to making and sourcing PPE. But 2 businesses ago, before I was manufacturing kayaks, I actually started a business manufacturing medical devices, and we were an FDA approved medical device manufacturer, and I sold mostly to emergency response providers, disaster preparedness agencies. And after that business, I was the engineering manager for a thermoform packaging company that actually did a lot of high-speed die-cut light gauge material processing. So very similar to what we needed to make face shields. Again, I didn't even really consciously think about those things. They all just kind of synthesized together in my subconscious, and it was like, well, we can do this. We've done it before. And so the contacts from emergency medical and emergency responders in that world, the contacts from the supply chain in the packaging world, all quickly came together with our sort of existing Sylvan Sport infrastructure. And the motivation was half, how do I keep this great team together and you know, not lose people on our great team here and keep people employed? And how can we put that to work to meet the need that's out there? So it was just sort of, it almost wasn't even a decision. It was just a, we have to do this type thing.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah, thanks for sharing, Tom.
I can add to that. This is Sarah, and part of the motivation and kind of connecting some of these stories particularly is that I was asked to help find some outlets for the manufacturing of a client I was working with at the time, Industry 9, and they have a 100 CNC machine shop that could be making components or could be, you know, providing automation services, et cetera. And so in trying to search for, you know, places for that effort to go, I found that it was a really hard to find an, you know, a platform or a network to help connect those opportunities, which, you know, is where the idea for Supply Connector came from, and really, you know, trying to solve some of those problems each of these panelists have already run up against, and in some cases already completely solved in that time frame. So yes, it kind of came from that network, but our network in the outdoor industry as chair of the North Carolina Outdoor Recreation Coalition was a great place to start. And so connecting with Tom and David and some of the other outdoor manufacturers across the country has really helped pull that effort together.
Great. How about Mark?
Well, one of the things that we got into, we were really not paying much attention to this. I was filling out forms for about 3 weeks, but we have enough work to continue on all the way into September without any new contracts. But Jason and I started looking and saying, what are we going to do in September and October? We need to extend our contracts out so we keep the people around. We don't have to lay people off. And we got into thinking about, hey, maybe PPP is one of the right ways to go. So that's one of our motivations, was pretty much selfish, saying, hey, we're going to extend our contracts out, keep people around, keep them employed, and continue on our little thing. But we started getting calls from local people, from DLA, people we work with throughout the government, going, hey, we need you guys. You have the supply structure. You understand the textile industry. You understand mill specs. We need material. We need products that are made in the U.S. made by U.S. manufacturers, material made in the U.S. And so it was a really steep learning curve for us, all of a sudden switching from having all Berry Amendment products dealing with DOD to learning about the FDA and medical supply chain. So Jason, my partner, did a lot of research. We found sources throughout the U.S. on how to bring in textiles, needles, different size needles, different FDA approved thread. It was a real challenge there for a while, but it's all together now. Now we have a U.S. source for materials, a U.S. source for thread. And so everything we're manufacturing now is from the U.S., all the material, everything we do. So one, it was kind of selfish for us. Second was, the demand for U.S. suppliers. People haven't really dealt with U.S. suppliers much in the FDA. And then the last one was the motivation. The people wanted on the floor, wanted to help out, wanted to do part of the community. So the motivation to help out, like all the other companies, picked up. And so here we are.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to have anything else to share, or should we move on to the next question? Okay, let's see.
Hey, April, I just wanted to say one last thing kind of tied to that, very similar to what Mark said. Believe it or not, and I hate it that it started this way, but Mark's comment about U.S. suppliers really struck a tone with, or strikes a note with me, because this actually started for us back in September when these tariffs increased. We were really caught off guard by that, and it really slammed our business in the part of the third quarter and all the fourth quarter, a little bit of the first quarter this year as well. And so we have been actively soliciting more U.S. based sources starting really last September. And so that's actually been a little bit helpful as we've gotten into this, the more COVID related activity. So anyway, just thought I'd mention that because it was a big impact on our business last year.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. All right. What has been your experience? And I realize the kinds of experience is going to be varied, and based on some one-on-one conversations with some of you, I know it's not all been good. Some of it will be good eventually, but it's not necessarily been easy. So what kind of hurdles have you had to overcome, or what kind of hurdles are you currently in the midst of right now? And even what's some of the good, good stories that that you're now able to see through some of that challenge?
Well, I'll comment on that a little bit in that, we were probably different in some of the others in that early March, we started to see significant demand increases as the surge was out there and pantries were being filled. We were looking at 30-40% increases in demand, and how are we going to respond to them, and taking steps with our overtime policy and perfect attendance awards and things like that we put in place, and enhanced compensation really very quickly so that we could respond to those needs. Now we're starting to see it turn the other direction. So now we're starting to probably feel a little bit of that softening. And now how are we going to respond on the backside of that? Because the same thing, trying to keep, we got about 550 people in the company, and, wanting to make sure we retain them. And how do we ensure, because we're seeing numbers now dropping almost 100% from the demand that we were seeing just 4 weeks ago. So we're kind of seeing a very whipsaw effect here, and how are we going to respond on the other side now? But the one thing is we've not had a COVID incident inside our facility at this point in time, and our folks have been able to leverage. Fortunately, with the Coca-Cola system, we get to participate. I get to participate on weekly international calls, so we're seeing firsthand what's going on in China with our ballers over there, how they're responding, and we're getting a lot of guidance and information that flows back into our system so that we can respond here. So that's been very helpful for us in trying to overcome some of the hurdles and some of the things out there that are going on in the
Yeah,
work.
helping you foresee some of the things that may present themselves.
They're weeks ahead of us, so we're seeing months ahead. So we're seeing a lot of what they've been doing and how they're responding, and then putting those policies in place here in our
Right.
operation here in the States.
Great. How about Mark? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, from our standpoint, the first couple of weeks as we went through probably the second half of March, as everybody experienced, conditions were changing almost hourly. So that one of the biggest challenges was just figuring out how we're going to navigate conditions, and only to know that 2 hours later, everything was going to be completely different. So it seemed like that became a way of life for several weeks. Things are settling in a little bit now, which is good. Initial supply chain readiness was great. The first week we were in this, we were in a quick response, and then a week later, supply chain became extremely stretched thin and quite challenging. And then I think the last thing I'll mention on the bad side is that in the first week or two, a lot of the major organizations we were dealing with were really not. They were in varying degrees of acceptance of the realities. So some organizations were very much on the cutting edge of what needed to be done, and they were decisive in acting. And other organizations were almost acting as if it was business as usual. And so there was some frustration to kind of get people to realize what everybody collectively was trying to accomplish, and getting everybody in gear. I'd say the most positive thing is that while we've maintained our workforce coming into the factory, we immediately put in place some very good healthcare protocol. For instance, all doorways were permanently propped open. We installed automatic door openers in restrooms. We hired one person to just be a cleaner that literally goes from one end of the building and then restarts cleaning and sanitizing. And so with that said, we've kept everyone healthy and in good shape and in good spirits throughout all of this.
That's good to hear.
For us, for Survival Innovations, we've had all three of them. For the first part, it was pretty ugly and pretty bad. We must have filled out 30 forms trying to get, how do we figure out, how do we get into this? The bad part of the administration part, filling out the forms, it was no reply from other people, other organizations we were trying to work with. So since then, it's picked up. The work that the CTD has been doing has really inspired us. They've grabbed the bull by the horns. So it's picking up. We've got to do a lot of things that we should have done. We've implemented a lot of lean manufacturing. We've expanded for social distancing, the production floor. So that's something we should have done, cleaned up the production floor a long time ago. We are experiencing some loss of hours. It takes about an hour, hour and a half to clean the machines twice a day, changing schedules around so people can keep social distancing during work. But the biggest experience, I would say, would be on our admin side of the house. Production, we go by ISO. Every product we go out the door is a life-saving device. Every product, when the products come in, they all go into the way we manufacture everything around here is all according to ISO, all according to quality control, material, drawing, packages. So that really didn't change much. I mean, we treat every mask just like a life-saving device. But the admin side of the house, the accounting side of the house, the material, just dealing with customers we've never dealt with before, which is in the commercial world and the medical fields. That's been a pretty good challenge for us, and we've been able to grow with it. So it's been a really good eye-opening experience for us. So one of the things that we have enjoyed was finding out how much and how positive the local governments, and I'm going to comment later on to that, how great they have been through this whole incident. So that would be the very good part of that side of the house that we talked about. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd love to tell people about the fact that my job shifted from giving tours of our new factory and all of our crew, which I love to do, to not being able to have any visitors here. That started I think that was March 3rd. So now I spend all my time clearing fire breaks of supply chain. It is endless. It is every day. We have 2 people full time. We have had raw material that we had were preparing wire transfers to pay for in advance from people we've never worked with before, who then refused the sale at the last moment and gave the material to somebody else. So what you guys are reading about states bidding against states, it's the same thing. In fact, I just stopped sharing our suppliers with other people, even here in Asheville, because I didn't know whether we'd end up being in competition.
Yeah.
So that's on the bad side. On the good side, we've had, I think it's, we're at 4 and counting, and tomorrow will be number 5, the time that another business somewhere in this region has bought our entire crew lunch and brought it. And many of these businesses are in trouble themselves. So this part is very moving to me. It really is so impressive, the community coming together.
That's a great story to share, David. Anyone else want to share? I've definitely heard a couple of the challenges. And I heard David speak to kind of how you're overcoming the fire breaks. I guess you just kind of put 2 people full-time on cleaning that. Anyone else want to share how you're overcoming some of those challenges, or, you know, and if you're not, what are you doing in the meantime?
I think it's really important that everybody on this call, and I'm sure that everybody on this call is well aware of this, but, you know, using the PPV or PPE and spreading people out, sending people home that you can send home and can work from home. I mean, it's very quiet, very different around here. Taking temperatures, I think, is super important, and sanitizing the facilities. So all those things, you know, as responsible manufacturers and as just citizens, I think we're all doing that, and it's important that we continue to do that. But, you know, our hurdles have been tremendous. I'll talk a little bit about, most of them have to do with more with the resource side of things. So when we get to that section, maybe we can talk about that.
Great.
One of the things I'll offer is overcoming the Pardee Hospital here, local hospital. Maureen Sullivan puts out consistent guidance on employees, how to clean your areas and stuff. It's been really great for us. We're a company of 30 people. So the guidance that she's been providing, Pardee Hospital, Mission Hospital, they've allowed us to quickly overcome a lot of the things, especially in the cleaning and what guidelines we should be looking at, federal guidelines and other things we should be doing. And to date, we hadn't had anyone sick, or matter of fact, we got a lot of people showing up for work. But local areas have been a lot of help, a lot of good knowledge out there for everyone.
That's great.
Yeah, I would offer one thing I think that was as helpful. We haven't had to necessarily deploy it yet, but we think it's going to be, will be very helpful, because we're pretty sure we're going to have an event. It's just a matter of when. Is zoning in our manufacturing. So if we can control employees going into zones and out of zones, if somebody is identified or comes in and says, I've been exposed to the virus, that then we can just identify who's been in that zone, and we can just contend with that zone and therefore allow the rest of the manufacturing operations to continue. So that's something that came out of China early on, was they were very much controlling the zones that employees would go in and out of, practicing all the other things on social distancing and, you know, the questionnaires and keeping visitors out and all that. But we're really trying to focus on zoning, and just know that that employee, when they were in your plant, they were only in zone A. They go back out to the break room, they sit in their seat in the break room, go back to zone A. And if you have an event, then you're only trying to clean and manage zone A, and maybe your plant's broken up into 2-3 zones or a dozen zones, depending on the size of the facility. So it's something that we're working with. It's part of our response plan when we do have our first COVID event, because we know we will. It's coming. We don't know when. But that was something I thought was very helpful, and we put that in place with our COVID response SOPs that we have out there now. So,
Thank you, Doug.
yeah.
So let's hear from some of you. Are you producing the product? Are you beyond the prototyping phase? And I know, for example, David, you know, with your face shields, you're probably on week 4 of producing those. And, you know, what's been your experience with kind of finding landing a contract with the buyer? I know that part can be, it's one thing to say, hey, I want to help. What can I do to help? And it's another to actually get someone to buy your product. So what's that sort of closing the deal side of things been like for you all?
The producing of the product, which is, we know a lot about sewing masks. In fact, one of the reasons why we were able to switch in one day is our entire operation is modular and designed to sew different kinds of apparel, maybe even 2 different kinds of apparel in the same day, let alone the same week. So I won't say that was trivial, but it wasn't hard. Face shields, on the other hand, we don't really have any latent skills or talent with plastic and machining. We have a few people on staff, so we were able to do that first day. But frankly, it's not really in our wheelhouse. So we started with Industry 9. They helped us with roughly the first 30,000 that we made, and then Mike gave us a call from Moog, and also in parallel, we're talking to Foothills Industries. If you don't know Foothills, they do a lot of contract work using a disadvantaged workforce, and they're just down the road from us, and also FDA-approved medical manufacturing facility. So actually, this week is the first week that we've slowed down on our staff making face shields and spun up working with Mike's team and working with Foothills Industries. And we see that as a natural evolution. We didn't have any more room. We needed to make more room for more sewing machines. It wasn't in our wheelhouse. It wasn't there. And I have a lot of confidence that's going to work out too. We'll still continue to serve as the marketing and sales conduit because for crazy reasons, we have more demand than we have capacity. Again, back to the Facebook phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've been in production about, I think this is our 3rd week, and each week we've gotten a little better, a little more output, a little more efficiency. Like David, we have more demand than we can meet, and it continues to grow with each passing day. I think just the hours of today before this call, I've gotten about 6 major new inquiries looking for a variety of different types of products. We were lucky in that we had a lot of contacts as well in the space before going into this, so we knew what their needs were and we knew we could meet them. We've had a unique, or I guess one of the good things is our technology has supported and allowed virtually all of the office staff to work remotely and to the outside world. That's been pretty seamless. I will say one of the challenges that we face is that it being prime, beginnings of the outdoor industry season when people are normally contacting us to buy our traditional products, our new product sales aren't happening, but our existing customer base from the last 15 years that are all reaching out to us for service needs or customer support needs, trying to manage those while we're doing this whole new different type of business is really challenging. And having a customer that has a very particular, what may be perceived as trivial need under the current circumstances, yet they still need that attention. That's been pretty difficult to kind of whipsaw back and forth from our old business to the current business and back, literally each minute. But we're glad that what we're producing now is all finding good homes quite quickly.
Good.
We just started producing today and for the mask, and we've been overwhelmed we got enough work for masks just by themselves for the next 8 weeks. The gowns, we are picking up a lot of interest on the gowns. We only have enough material for 1,000. We did that at risk because we didn't see anyone out there making the disposable gowns. So we went ahead and found the manufacturer, material supplier, and we just went ahead and just started making them. We're trying to see if there's a need local before we start going through national. So do we have a contract? No, but let me tell you, the Carolina Textile District came through, and Libby O'Brien and Dan St. Louis and Aaron Dawson are doing a yeoman's work down there. If y'all don't know them, if y'all haven't used them, you need to contact them because they're true professionals in what they're doing, and they have grabbed this by the horn, and they're just doing an outstanding job down there.
Yeah, I want to echo that because they were an early leader in the space, not just for North Carolina, but for other parts of the country too, where they were helping connect some of the textile-based resources. We're specifically working with them on a lot of the non-textile-based sources and needs, and the thing that I think everyone really wanted was this network and these platforms to be robust at the time you needed them, which was, early March. And a lot of them are just now coming online, and ours being one of those. But what we're finding is there's a little bit of a niche between each of them. And I'm not trying to jump topics to resources, but I did want to just, again, kind of mention, Carolina Textile District had a great platform and continues to have a great platform to help businesses that are even considering pivoting to this now with the kits that they're putting together. And it's a good example of how each of these platforms are working together. I sent over a contact from Bissell out of Michigan to give them some filtering material that Bissell is willing to donate, but Bissell somehow found us first. And so it's important that even these platforms are networked and talking and sharing. And that's a huge win because they're going to donate a ton of this material so that now their non-FDA approved masks can have some filtering material in them. So we're trying to kind of provide that resource that you guys all probably wished you had in March. But if suppliers and manufacturers are still running up against roadblocks and trying to find materials, or like David's example where somebody, sold it out from under you and you need to find someone new, our resource, Carolina Textile District, these are all places that you can potentially find a new supplier quickly.
There, they stole it.
They stole it.
Anyone else want to, we can go ahead and jump, we're getting a little tight on time anyway. We can jump to resources unless someone wants to kind of talk about the contracting, buying. Anyone want to add anything else? So what other resources? So we're hearing Supply Connector. Thank you, Sarah, for sharing that and for building that. And any other resources, whether that be, I know that, we're having sort of resource overload at this point, probably because we're all getting emails of the new latest and greatest, now contact this person or that person. What have you found that's really landed? What have you found that's just really propelled you and enabled you to be successful?
Well, for us, I'll go ahead and admit, North Carolina Procurement Technology Technical Assistant, Pam Racer from Western Carolina, has been a lot of help providing us. We get a lot of emails, just like you said, but there's some you click on, the information's there, the POC's there, the telephone number's there, call them, talk to this person. It's really been helpful. The Industrial Expansion Solution out of NC State, ran by Mike Mullins, Rex Redford, and Chris McGraw as the local rep, have been very good. Making weekly calls, weekly telecons, see what we need, where we're at, who we need to talk to from the NC State at the state level. North Carolina Military Business Center, Scott Dorney, working right with the local government, right with the state government. He's got an ear to the state government, which has really been good for us since we are a service disabled veteran owned company. So they have really helped us out. and the local governments, Brittany and Burton Hodges from Hendersonville, and April. I don't know where she works at, but she has been a lot of help. You know, is the difference between help and information is people that answer your email and do follow-ups. Pick up the phone and call. And all the people I mentioned are out there. They all pick up the phone, they call, they see how you're doing. They return your calls, which is really nice, or they return your emails almost immediately. So if you want to know who those people are, again, I'll go over them, or you can send a chat line with them. But great organizations that we've worked with before, but they have really stepped up and come through.
Thank you, Mark. Anyone else?
Just quickly, I do want to give kudos to you and Clark, April, because I think that y'all's work with the county has been instrumental in shaping the policies, and I hope that they'll continue to listen to y'all as we go forward, because when you called, I didn't really know where our conversation was going to go, but I saw it firsthand in the guidance that's been provided by the county, and I hope that they'll continue to listen to you and that y'all continue to ask, because that's been very helpful.
Great. That's great to hear. Appreciate that. Thank you, Mike.
And I'll give a shout out to Nathan Ramsey at Land of Sky and his role, Scott Hamilton at Golden Leaf. They've been helpful in making connections statewide.
Thank you.
And we've had some luck with the National Governors Association. Again, not just specific to North Carolina, but between the Carolina Textile District, the National Governors Association, and then some of the other platforms that we're trying to coordinate with, we have been able to, kind of like the example I gave earlier, we've been able to kind of serve up this information to the right places on demand. So I think the earlier comment about, being able to contact people directly is really that advantage. And I think that'll be kind of the way that we continue to network this as we are starting to open businesses back up. And I think Tom has some great products, for that in terms of sneeze guards and shields and counter shields and the automatic door openers that I think we need to be looking at for the future, because we are going to be opening doors, and those are the things that are going to help keep our businesses open and our people safe. And so those are the types of products that I would, really recommend. And Tom, we're actually changing our intake form for you, because we want to start kind of pushing that message more and more that, business is going to be open. Yeah, look at that. Look at that. It's awesome. It's beautiful. And you started making that really early. So, it's great. You're primed and ready for helping the economy get started.
Well, what's crazy, we made these for our own building so we could keep our factory as safe as possible. We came through on a Sunday when no one was here, and I actually was assessing every single area where people touched and needed to work, and we made these for our doors to open the restroom doors, and then it wasn't me, somebody else here said, hey, other people probably need those too, right?
Yeah. And I think it's a good example of kind of the tiers and layers that we're seeing here, right? We have an immediate need for our healthcare institutions, but we have a future need for the businesses that are about to open, and I'm going to say about to open because that's our hope, right? And so you also have different tiers and levels of manufacturing. You have, people who are manufacturing at huge volumes that FEMA is gobbling up, and you have smaller manufacturers that are able to, source and sell or give or donate to smaller institutions. And there's a place for everybody, and there's a place for everybody to connect. And so if you're considering it, there's still a place for you. there's still a need.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah. That was actually, if we didn't get any questions, that was going to be a question that I asked. And actually it is it is one of the questions somebody has asked, just thinking about the future. I know we're getting tight on time. I only have 5 minutes. If each of you, if you have something to share, is there anything you would do differently if you were to do it all over again, having, the value of the experience that you've had now? Is there anything you would do differently?
I would not do this over again.
Well, okay, so what advice would you share with someone who hasn't stepped into the space yet, but is considering it or is making making plans to?
No, and let me be clear. I don't mean that I wouldn't pivot our manufacturing. I mean that the whole
Crisis, yeah, you don't want that. Yeah.
experience is something I would prefer not to have to go through.
Right.
No, I think the only thing I would do would probably go a little further out on a limb. Like Mark, you mentioned about the gown manufacturing, you just decided to do it even though you didn't have firm contracts. On some of the sourcing of very much needed things like N95s, when we first reached out, we were able to get them at nearly normal prices, and within 4 days, those prices more than doubled. So I was trying to communicate that as thoroughly as I could to the organizations in need, but if I had to do it over again, I would have rolled the dice a little bit and gone ahead and gotten those things rolling, because that would have, that would have really been a much more effective solution. But that's about it.
Mark, do you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, I won't go hindsight, but I'll tell you what we have discovered. We're a 30-man company. We can do things really quick, change direction. Our manufacturing engineers came up with a way that we can sit there and bring on a second shift. So actually, we're going to go out this weekend. We've got people coming in, high school students and college students that need a job, can't get unemployment. So we're bringing them in to help speed manufacturing up during the week. So for the regular employees. So that's one of the things that we're doing that probably wouldn't do, that we normally wouldn't do, but there's a need out there to put people back to work, and we got to do it cleanly and safely. So that's one of the things we're moving forward to do. So that starts tomorrow, matter of fact. So hopefully that works out.
Thank you, Mark.
In April, I would comment, Mike alluded to it earlier, but the rallying cry, so I would do the same thing because it was just such a huge rallying cry for a lot of our folks internally. Again, whole group of engineers who are grounded, can't travel. Their work is normally not here in Enca. It's around the country, and they embraced it and just took off immediately with it. And we put a full-time resource on it to do all the logistics scheduling, because we're now having 18-wheelers show up at strip malls, and they don't realize how product is coming in from our perspective. And so we're having to coordinate all that. They're dragging product pallets off of trucks. There's no docks. They're not aware how we're shipping it. So trying to get all that stuff coordinated now. We've had to put a full-time resource on there, and she's doing nothing but just trying to coordinate. Here's the packaging configuration. Here's how we can get it from A to B, and it's almost nonstop right now. But it's been a huge rallying cry for a portion.
Yeah, that's a good point to make. That maybe you, when you were getting started, you maybe didn't think about, and this was mentioned, that David mentioned as well, is that at first you start because you're thinking, I just want to keep my workforce, I want to retain them and I want to keep them working. And then you realize you actually need, you need people to do new jobs, not just in production, but in logistics or in administration or sales. So, that's probably something to be thinking about, at least for if someone is entering this space. Mike or David, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I would just say that, if you're going to if there are people on the line listening, they're going to jump into this and don't have experience with the FDA process. Tom mentioned he had some experience in that area. That's a big time sink that we've invested hundreds and hundreds of hours in already, and still got a ways to go. So my only suggestion would be do something simple. And that'll probably be the most effective thing that you can do. So,
Mike, as a follow-up, I know that you have been working with a consultant to some extent to help you kind of navigate and be strategic. Is there any insight you can share on that?
Well, yeah. So, yeah, if you don't know, you need the FDA process is, you know, you really require a consultant to work through that with you. We, you know, hired one. Looks like it's going to be between $50,000 and $80,000 to get it done. You know, there's insurance requirements that we never thought about before. There's license agreements that we put in place, manufacturing contracts, hired 2 consultants, created 2 new entities. It's been a lot of work, and I hope it results in something in the end. But we're very close. Every day we're closer to actually getting an FDA approved ventilator. So we're hoping that it all pays off.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll step off now.
Okay. Well, we're at about time. We did have one other question that that was for Doug, and I don't know if it's a quick enough answer, Doug. But any insider advice you can share with other U.S. companies that you're seeing, that you kind of mentioned this, that you're seeing from your other organizations in China? Can you give some examples of changes you've had to make based on that information?
I think a lot of them have been touched upon during the course of the hour, but yeah, from, you know, the restriction on visitors, the social distancing, you know, taking chairs out everywhere where there's a potential for 2 people to be seated, you know, remove those chairs. So we looked at the break room configuration, you know, washable keyboards, isolation in the shipping area. No longer do drivers, are they able to even physically get into our operation. We've simplified our bill of lading process. We no longer sign the bill. We weren't really required to. So we've eliminated any touch points along the way. Notion's been to create an isolation room. So if you have an event, you have a quick place to get somebody to if something occurs, get them there. The zoning, we talked about the zoning, that was early. So if you don't lose your whole workforce, if you've got 50 people and you've got them zoned, maybe you just take a zone out and you can keep producing because you know that person hasn't been in any of those zones. We have employee questionnaire that we ask all employees to sign, a whole series of questions, acknowledgments, self-reporting. We've not gone down the route of temperature because a lot of guidance we get on that is that, you know, due to the availability of equipment, maybe some of the inaccuracies in the measurement process. And then on top of that too, the fact that about 50% of the people are asymptomatic. So you may be glad to get some false readings there. So we've stayed away from temperature readings. I know they're doing it in China. We see that on the videos that we get from there, but we haven't done that to this point. But that's probably a lot of the things that I think that some of the things that we've done in that space is what I can. No aerosols, also no aerosols. Try to keep aerosols because it lifts the germs. So,
Interesting.
How long you keep sanitation in place? You know, a lot of people put it down and they wipe it. Well, if you put it down, you got to allow it to do its work. You got to keep it there for 2 minutes or so. So those things like that we're picking up and encouraging people to, when we're cleaning in the workplace. All those little things are a lot of things we've picked up along the way from our international bottlers and our U.S. bottlers.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a super informative conversation. I really appreciate all of your input. If I could just kind of wrap up with a few takeaways that I've heard you all share. For one, for anyone listening that needs to jump off, this has been recorded, so it'll be available on the Chamber website. But first and foremost, connections seem like they are key. They've been helpful, and there's a couple ways that I think that's been achieved. One is through your existing networking contacts, but 2, I think we've got a couple resources like Supply Connector in like Carolina Textile District. If you're lacking in connections, those are good places to go to identify those potential buyers and contracts. Also, the motivation, of course, is to keep our workforce working and to keep them on your team. You've invested a lot of your own time and money in skilling them up for your needs. So that's clearly a strong motivation. And also, you know, one of the positive things that I'm taking away that I heard from David is that you weren't really expecting is this community goodwill, even from people who are probably struggling. They're still giving. So, you know, for example, at Kitsbow, where you're having 5 different organizations buying your workforce lunch, I think we can probably all agree that we're seeing a lot of that. And that's something, it's easy to get bogged down by the stress and the challenges, but helpful to remember some of the ways that we're showing up as humans and as a community. Tons of resources shared. I really appreciate some of those resources. SB, TDC, Pam Racer, thank you. The economic development organizations in your respective counties. Certainly lean on them and make sure if you're not talking to them, make sure to pick up the phone and call them. And often there's regional economic development and there's state level. So different ways to engage there. Nathan Ramsey with our workforce board, and of course, Golden Leaf and the National Governors Association. So thank you for sharing those resources. Those are all really good. And I also just wanted to highlight the point made about the fact that right now we're addressing the immediate need, the healthcare professionals. And this kind of answers one of the questions submitted. Do you see this need falling off? Well, to Sarah's point, probably not, because as we restart the economy and as we open businesses back up, we're going to be working, you know, our lives are going to be different. We're going to be probably, you know, social distancing on and off, and we're going to be having to monitor you know, and sanitize our environments and ourselves for the next, you know, several months to a year or two. So it sounds like, you know, the PPE need is probably not going to, you know, there's not going to be a short of that need for sure. So keeping that in mind, that there continue to be a future need for different individuals. And then the final sort of piece of advice that I heard, lots of good advice that you all shared, but one that really stood out to me was what Mike shared, Mike Adams, about really needing FDA sort of expertise, and that if you don't have that, then be looking for a consultant or to be partnering with someone that can lend that expertise. So these are, I mean, just really high level, really great takeaways that I think we can all, you know, take on with us as action steps. So
I do want to add though, April, that there is still a need for non-FDA approved devices. So if you're not in healthcare or have that restriction, there is still protective equipment that people are buying to, like I said, if they're a regular business looking to reopen or other industries that aren't requiring FDA. And if you can't get that, you can still contribute. There's still a need.
Thank you, Sarah. Any other final comments from anyone else? Well, like I said, this has been hugely valuable, hugely informative. I think we've addressed most of the questions that came through, but I'm happy to share these questions and follow up offline. If your question wasn't answered, feel free to reach out to me, April Brown at Economic Development Coalition. You can find me on our webpage. Again, thank you to the panelists. I know the stress is not going to die anytime soon. So I wish you all well, and I hope you all are able to stay safe while you're working and surrounding yourselves in stress. So thank you, and y'all take care.
Bye.
Thank you. Be safe.
Bye.
Guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.